And welcome to the first live broadcasting, I guess, of the Ernest Emerson podcast. We're going to do a Q&A podcast here today. So, and actually the podcast itself, which we're recording, will be posted up at a later date, but the guys that are out there on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that are able to see this. You're getting the live version as we speak. So I want to welcome everyone today. We've had quite a few questions come up, basically not just since we started the podcast, but actually over the years that I wrote down some of them and got 3 or 4 pages of them here that you guys submitted just recently also. So I've got a lot of stuff to cover today. And I think it's going to be fun. I'm here with Danny T. Hey, Danny, how you doing?
Good morning.
And also, we have Aaron and also my daughter Megan here that are doing the filming on their phones. So, hey, Aaron. Hey, Megan.
Hello.
And what I'm going to do is, get through these, try not to be too wordy, but hopefully answer the questions to the best of my ability. And, when I started the podcast, I didn't really want to make it about knives because there's a lot of things that causes a problem with me morally and ethically, I guess, just because we wanted the podcast to stand alone. And it's the same principle that I have with the classes that I teach. Edge weapons and hand-to-hand combat and all that. I never mention the knives unless someone asks me about them specifically because I never wanted my classes or anything to ever be misrepresented as an infomercial, which I've seen with other knife instructors and companies that had people in their employment that taught edge weapons or hand-to-hand combat. Because I think that's disingenuous. I think it's also they're not morally clear on that. Because for me, it was separation of church and state. I wanted to do the same thing with the podcast, but frankly, what's happened is you guys have kind of forced me into a corner, which is not a bad thing. It's just we have so much interest in the knives going on around the name Emerson and all that we had to make a decision to say, you know what, we'll talk about knives. You guys want to hear about them, you want to know about them. You all know, I believe that I have a knife company, so I think we've established the fact that we've got enough podcasts under our belt now that when we talk to guests, they're not infomercials. They're to get information to you, hopefully life-saving information, sometimes life information or life lessons. Those are the people that I want to have on the podcast. So, but can't get around the fact that I have a knife company and make knives. So here we are today, and most of these questions are actually about knives. So I'm okay with that. So as long as you're okay with that. Anyway, the first question that I want to get to, I'm going to get to first. The reason is because it involves an animal, and I hope that she's going to be good throughout the broadcast, but I don't know. We might have to remove her from the office here. And again, bear with me. This is at the factory. If the phone rings or if somebody comes charging through the door with, hey, Ernie, this machine broke down or whatever, I might have to pause for a minute. And you might hear machine noises coming out from the background from time to time, because this is my office at our factory. But anyway, Johnny on the spot, his question is, what animals do you have? Well, this could be a long answer because we've got a lot of animals. We have horses. We have chickens. My wife is a beekeeper, so I guess bees are animals too. They might be insects, but we got a lot of those. We have 2 cats, Dexter, the Maine Coon, and Peanut, the little gray street cat that my daughter Megan adopted many years ago. And then we have a Lola, which is a little Pomeranian that belongs to my daughter Rachel. My wife and I have Bruno, who's a Labradoodle. And then we also have a new addition to our family, Stella. And I'm going to grab her right now, so bear with me. Be right back. Stella. Come here, Stella. Come here, Stella. Come here. Oh. This is Stella, and she's the latest addition to our family. We fell in love with her the first time we saw her, and she's a little girl, and I'm going to tell you just a quick story about Stella, but how could you not love that face? Go ahead, look out there and see. All right. Now here's the story on Stella, and we were at a spot where we didn't really need to have more animals, but what happened is one of our jiu-jitsu instructors, Slavina, I can never pronounce her name right. She's from Bulgaria. We just call her V. It's easier to remember. And she went back. She'd been gone for a few years and went back to visit. And she's over there in, I don't know if she was in Sofia or whatever city she was in, but she noticed a homeless guy walking down the street carrying a little puppy by one leg, like you'd carry a chicken. And so she ran over. She saw it. She's an animal lover. They have several dogs themselves. She ran over and said, "I'm taking that dog." And she was ready to go to blows with the guy if he didn't give the dog up. So she grabbed this little dog, little girl, who became Stella, and she was skinny as a twig. She had over 200 ticks on her. She was beat up and bruised. And my wife got an email with a picture, and she didn't tell me she got the email with a picture, but that kind of set the ball in motion. So V took the dog, got her nursed back to health, and brought her back on a plane. She's even got a Bulgarian passport, a legit Bulgarian dog passport from Bulgaria to get her back here to the U.S. And we immediately, the first time I saw her, the girls saw her, we were like, we got to have that dog. And so we took the little dog. She gave it to us. We kind of demanded it, I guess, what it came down to. And so she had no choice. And we ended up adopting that little Bulgarian street dog. And she's one of the coolest dogs I've ever had in my life, and so we're totally in love with her. And anyway, that's the story of our adopted Bulgarian street orphan dog, and just super glad they are. She's absolutely beautiful, and she's really got a great demeanor. She's going to be a good watchdog. We did a DNA test on her, and she's pretty much German Shepherd and Swiss White Shepherd, and then 20 or 30% of other breeds. So she's going to be a pretty big dog, and she's just a doll. Question number 2, Flex 0351. Is there ever, and I know you said you won't do it, going to be a production CPC-6? I know a lot of people would go crazy about it and would love to have one. No. That's the answer to that one. The Necro Dot Maker. What was the hardest thing about knife making to learn? Well, the physically hardest thing, the actual thing that took the most practice was, how to grind a straight line. And that's because, you can have a lot of skills, and you can be a carpenter or a machinist or a plumber, and you can learn how to use hand tools and drills and mills and all those good things. But grinding the blade is not a skill that you pick up. A gunsmith knows how to use all of the same tools to work on guns, but he doesn't do a lot of grinding against a belt grinder. maybe to just touch parts up and things like that. But the skill of grinding a blade is unique to knife making. I guess maybe if you were a scissors maker or something like that, you might have some expertise in that. I don't think there's a lot of custom scissors makers out there right now. So, the hardest thing really was the grinding of the blade. Oh, there we go. Someone's calling in. Maybe they're calling to place an order. Aaron? Anyway, grinding the blade was the hardest thing. Getting a steady, not wavering line, getting a consistent finish, getting each side symmetrical so that the grind height on one side is the same height on the other. That's an experiential process. You can't pick that up anywhere else. I can't be a carpenter and as a result of being a carpenter, know how to grind a blade. I know how to work with wood. I know how to work with hammers and nails and screwdrivers and all that. But and that all applies to knife making. But learning how to grind that blade, that was the hardest thing. And we'll talk about that in a minute because there's another couple questions that are kind of related to that. So. Necro Maker asks again, do you have any personal advice? Well, my advice would be that Michael Walker, who is a well-known custom knife maker, told me one time when I was in the beginning stages of my career, he said, Ernie, if you don't want to make your 1000th knife, don't make your first knife. How true that was. He was absolutely correct in telling me that. Because it's kind of like it's almost like an addiction or an obsession, if you will. It's a fun thing. You get great feedback. It's kind of like if you were a furniture builder and you made a chair, and you made it, and you sit in your own chair, the chair that you made, that you cut and that you sanded and that you finished. It's kind of that same way with the first couple of knives that you make. You make a knife. Maybe for your dad, maybe for a friend of yours, or maybe for yourself. But there's something about having that knife finished, as rough or as finished as it is, because I started out pretty rough, if you will. But there was something about having it in my hand. It was a knife. It was something that I made, and just be ready for that feeling. And when we talk about jiu-jitsu and things like that, we talk about catching the fever. It's the same thing with knife making. Once you catch the fever, it's you're up in the middle of the night dreaming up knife designs and what machine you're going to get next and things like that. So those are the things that happen. So be ready for that. Be ready for spending all your free time designing and building and grinding and all that. Because that'll happen if you really do catch the fever. But for a real piece of advice, the thing that I would say is this: save your money and buy a good grinder. You can get by on $125 drill presses. We have a ton of them out in the shop because they work fine. You're making a small part. You don't need heavy industrial drill presses and things to drill tiny holes in steel and stuff. So you can get by with those types of what I would call budget priced machinery. But when it comes to grinding, like I said earlier, the toughest thing for me to learn how to do was grind a straight line. And part of the reason is that I had a primitive belt grinder. I actually built the darn thing with a motor out of a washing machine and turned the drive wheels and the pulleys and everything and made pillow blocks and put the shaft in the bearings and all that. And used belts until they were so smooth you couldn't even, they were just smooth. Because I didn't have any money and I didn't have a lot of, room to put stuff in. But that forced me to learn how to grind on a very primitive level. And then I stepped up and bought a kind of a budget grinder and all that. But it's eventually you're going to get to the point where the grinder really makes the big difference, and a good grinder makes all the difference in the world. And in the last like 4 or 5 years, I ran into an old friend of mine that I didn't know was building grinders. His name's Travis Wirtz, and he makes, in my opinion, probably the best knife grinding machine, or knife grinder, 2x72 grinder that's ever been built. It's so, going from having to wear headphones like this when I'm grinding, because it's so noisy, you blow your ears out, to being able to go in there and turn that Travis Wirtz grinder on and forget that it's on, because it's so. I've literally walked out of the my custom grinding area and left the machine on because it's that quiet, and it's very solid, and it makes grinding blades a true joy. So that's something that I would say is, if you're going to spend some money, a lot of guys will buy a mill and all that. That's great. I can get by without a mill. I can get, I can use hacksaws, and I can use files and things like that to cut things out and shape them and all that. Mill makes it a little easier, but give me the choice between buying a mill and buying a good grinder. As a novice knife maker, I buy the grinder, because that's what makes the knife. Once again, Necromaker, can you tell us more about the history of the Emerson combat system? Well, there's not enough time in the day for me to run all that down for you here today, but I'll try and be a little brief about it. The Emerson combat system really grew out of my exposure to real fighting, and the martial arts exposure that I had since I was 14 years old or so. And that history has been told several times in several places. You can poke around on the internet to find out my history in the martial arts. But it really came down to studying martial arts that were things that were being taught by people who didn't fight. The play fighting, if you will, that takes place in quote-unquote sparring or kumite and things like that, it's really not, it's not like real fighting, believe me. And I'm not a guy who goes out and picks fights, and I never really was a guy that went out and picked fights, but I ended up in a lot of fights, let's just say that. In real knockdown, drag out, broken teeth, noses, ears torn, broken hands, all those kind of fights. And one of the things that I realize is I'm not using any of those quote-unquote martial arts techniques that I learned in all of these crazy kung fu and karate and all those kind of classes I was taking. And then I moved out to California to study, I saw my first Bruce Lee movie. And but I knew about Bruce because I actually have some of the black belt magazines that I bought as a young boy, all the way back to 65, 66, 67, and the very first issues that Bruce Lee was featured in. So I was aware of him. Ended up seeing the first movie several years later and was like, I got to do that. Came out to California, found out that Dan Inosanto and Richard Bastillo had the school that was teaching Bruce Lee's martial art, Jeet Kune Do. And I walked in there, and what happened there?
I dropped my phone.
I walked in there, and it was like walking into the Kronk boxing gym. There were heavy bags all over. Guys had boxing gloves on, headgear and stuff, and they were pounding the living daylights out of each other. And I was like, okay, this is where I want to be. And so one of the things that I learned was, Bruce was all about fighting. He didn't teach martial arts so that you could do a form or some kind of kata or go out and, in fact, it's funny because, one of the big things back in those days was why don't the JKD guys compete? And there was one simple answer: because we got kicked out of every tournament we were in because of excess contact. Go figure. It's a martial art. It's a fighting sport. Whatever. The JKD guys would hit people, and so they'd get disqualified. And we're like, well, what the hell? What use is doing that if you can't fight? So anyway, where I'm going with it is, having that mentality, being kind of bred into me, if you will, from where I was from and everything, and then finding that environment to flourish in. My ideas about what should be taught, and again, you take a martial art that has been doctrinized or softened up, if you will, for 200 or 300 years because it was outlawed at one time or whatever, and fighting wasn't allowed, or teaching fighting skills wasn't allowed, so they softened up a lot of the martial arts, and they came up with a lot of modifications to kind of sporterize it and all that. What does that do? It paints it into a corner far away from what actually happens out in the street, and someone really hits you with all their might. And so anyway, being in that environment, because I never studied martial arts for the sake of the art. I studied martial arts to be a better fighter, and that was it. That was the only reason. It had nothing to do with being able to show off fancy, flourishes and learn how to do crazy jumping, spinning kicks and things like that. It was like, how in the hell am I going to fight my way out of a situation if the bad guy shows up? So anyway, the Emerson combat system, as it kind of started to develop in my head, was basically born and bred in the JKD stuff, but that was mainly stand-up fighting. And again, we had a lot of stuff come and go in the JKD school because it was called the Filipino Cali Academy. It was the original place where Dan and Richard taught Bruce Lee's art, and along with the Filipino martial arts. And it actually started my knife making career. But that's a whole other story. And so anyway, you progress a few years, and lo and behold, they open up the Gracie Academy. And this was the original Gracie Academy, which just happened to be about 6 or 7 blocks away from where I live. So by hook or crook, I ended up over at the Gracie Academy. And again, now we're talking jiu-jitsu that was bred for street fight. And there we go again. Now I'm on the ground with that same mentality that this is made for a real fight, for self-defense, for using against another opponent, not a sporterized version of something that would be in the Olympics, let's say, and based on gathering points against an opponent. It was pretty freaking hardcore. And the people that were at the JKD school were pretty hardcore people. They were real fighters. There was a lot of I would have had those guys cover my back any day of the week. The guys that I trained with over there. Well, here we are at the Gracie Academy. Same exact thing. There were tough guys in those schools. Jiu-jitsu is hard work. Same thing at the Cali Academy. You got your nose broke, you got your eyes black, you got teeth knocked loose, you got your jaw misaligned. I mean, you got to want to fight to put up with that self-abuse, I guess. Same thing over at the Gracie Academy. It was hard. It was tough. It was brutal. It was you got hurt, and so the people that were there, they were doing it not for fun. It was because they wanted to be fighters. And so I took that whole mentality. And when I started putting together the Emerson combat system, I was called in to be the hand-to-hand and edge weapon instructor for a company called GSGI. And that was a company that did security and personal security and security evals and a whole bunch of different things, we'll just say that. And it was all former SEAL Team 6 guys. And so I ended up being the hand-to-hand and edge weapons instructor, the head guy in that department, if you will, for quite a few number of years. And because of that exposure, being with guys that had come out of a war-fighting combat environment, again, it helped refine what I soon to realize was that certain things work in combat, in real hand-to-hand combat, and certain things don't. And again, I fall back on the quote by Dan Gable, one of the world's greatest wrestlers and coaches that exist. If something isn't necessary, don't do it. If something is necessary, then do it every day. And it's that mentality. Why am I wasting time doing things that I'm never going to use in combat? I never would even be able to do. So, that's kind of the history of the Emerson combat system. It was like Bruce Lee, and I'm not comparing myself to Bruce. But what I'm saying, it was a stripping away of the things that were not necessary and only keeping the things that were necessary, and being aware of what a human being can do in a high-stress environment and what they can't do in a high-stress environment. So that's that. What knife model are you most proud of and why? Well, I'd have to say that would start with the CQC6. And some of you might not be aware of what knife that is, but the CQC6 was the knife that basically started my association with the Navy SEAL teams and special operations community. And it became a knife that, there's a story behind that. I've told it many, many times. I'm sure you guys can find that one too. Actually, Blade magazine ran two back-to-back issues with the story of the CPC6 a couple of years ago, and it's funny because they ended up being the best-selling issues of the magazine ever printed. So a lot of people know about it, and you can find that story. But the CQC6 is the one I am most proud of, and right behind that would be the CQC7, because the CQC7 was the offspring of the CQC6. I changed it up a little bit to make it a little bit different when I went up and was working with Benchmade on the original design. And then that became the archetype for what tactical knives became. And so I'm probably more known for the CQC7 than I am for the CQC6, but I'm more known for the CQC6 in the original, the combat environment, the military, back from several years ago, and the CQC7 more to the general public, and also that knife became a huge knife of choice by the U.S. military also. So those two knives. If you had a chance to collaborate with any other knife maker, who would it be and why? Well, this sounds at the risk, people really pass a lot of judgment on me from time to time, almost on everything that I say. So you can judge me on this. You can say that I'm being an arrogant a-hole if you want, but that's not really what's going on. I don't really care to work with any other knife makers. A couple of reasons. I've got a ton of designs that I just don't have the capacity or time to get out there. So I really don't have room for other knife makers' designs. And this company was made, to be the Emerson Knife Company, to get Emerson designs out. And honestly, when we started the company, I went to Benchmade. We had a collaboration actually for the CQC7, and I was talking to Les, and I said, Les, I've got all these other designs. They're good designs. They need to be out there in the hands of people that are using the real knife. And he said, Ernie, you can't become the Emerson Knife Company. We're Benchmade. And I said, okay, I got it. Totally understand that. But it also planted the seed that, I've got to get these knives out there. So that helped me make my decision about starting up the production knife company. So it's the Emerson Knife Company. And I don't want to sound flippant. I don't need designs from other knife makers. If I see something that I think is truly amazing and is worthy of being used in the hands of people that put their lives on the line with the gear that they carry, then I might, make a consideration for it. But right now we're doing a pretty good job in-house with the designs that I do. And it reminds me of I'm a big Rolling Stones fan, and it reminds me of the story of Keith Richards, who I think is the greatest rock and roll guitarist that ever lived. And they were doing something in the studio one time, and at the same time, Slash, Guns N' Roses, was also They were doing some recording there, and they got together in the sound room and all that. And Slash said, Keith, I think we could jazz up these solos a little bit. I got some ideas we could do. And Slash is a pretty damn good guitar player in his own right. And Keith Richards turned to him and said, you know what? Nobody changes my guitar solos. And quite frankly, you can leave the room and don't come back. And so, that is not arrogance. That's not Keith Richards being an a-hole. That's Keith Richards saying, I know what I do, and I know how I want it to be, and I don't want it to be tainted by other stuff. So, and actually he did the same thing with Jimmy Page. And anyone who knows Led Zeppelin or Jimmy Page knows he's one of the world's greatest guitar players. And Keith did the same thing with him. He said, no, I do my own guitar solos. Well, folks, I do my own knives, and I've done a pretty good job of it, so I'm pretty happy with it. What's my favorite tool or machine to use in the knife making shop? That is the grinder. I love grinding. It's fun for me. It's a time when I can literally unplug from the world and go into cyberspace with music or podcasts. Listen to a lot of podcasts. Joe Rogan, Jocko, Mind Pump. All of those podcasts are on my list, so I listen to them all the time. Dr. Venkman, do you ever carry knives from other knife makers? If so, what are some of your favorites? No, I don't carry knives by other knife makers. Again, don't mistake that for arrogance. I make knives, and I make the knives I want to carry. So the knives I carry are my own. What's your favorite? This is Maze 2K. What is your favorite fighting knife style for a fixed blade? For a fixed blade, as a fighting knife, people think in terms of, you need a big Bowie knife, you need a big, 14, 15-inch, dagger or whatever in the hell it happens to be. What it comes down to is my favorite fixed blade knife still has to be a knife that I'm going to carry. Why is that? Well, because I don't get to pick and choose when I'm going to have to use that knife. I don't get to pick and choose when a bad guy's going to do something stupid. I don't get to pick and choose when a car accident happens in front of me and I need to get to that car and get someone out of a seatbelt or a potential car fire. So it has to be a knife that I'm going to carry. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, it can't be a great big giant 14-inch Bowie because I'm just not going to carry that. It has to be a smaller size fixed blade. We have a knife called the police utility knife that is about as big a fixed blade as I would ever carry. And again, you have to understand. Remember when I said about what happens in combat? Knife on knife or knife against another weapon encounters are still extreme close quarters combat. Once the first strikes are thrown and the battle is engaged, it's chest to chest. So wielding a long Bowie knife when we're rolling around on the ground, because that's probably where it's going to end up no matter what, is a hindrance. It's not an advantage. If we were quote unquote sword fighting, like most martial arts and edged weapons are taught, then the length of the weapon could give you an advantage. But no one fights like that. And again, that's one of those things, as you look at real, actual combat, only do what's necessary and never do anything that's not necessary. I don't practice sword fighting. It's the same thing. The fight is engaged, boom, 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 chest to chest, rolling around the ground. I have to have a knife that I can use in those kind of environments. So, on top of the fact that it's not socially acceptable to carry a great big long knife around on your person out going to the movies or anything like that. So it still has to be a knife I can tuck into a pocket or carry on a sheath and not have to be obtrusive. So my favorite knife for fixed blade knife fighter would be a smaller knife with a Bowie-esque blade, not specifically a Bowie type, but a much shorter version that I can. And again, I talk that we make neck knives and things like that. Well, why do we make those? Because I can carry a fixed blade knife in a quote-unquote way that no one knows that I might have that knife, and it could be my ultimate backup. And those are short. Those are just about twice the size of your fist. In other words, handle is about fist size and the blade's about fist size. So we're talking 6 or 7 inches long. Dan Tullen, what do you like to hunt, and what rifle is your favorite for hunting or long-range shooting? Well, I come from northern Wisconsin, so I was born and bred hunting and fishing back there. And the main thing that we always hunted was deer, white-tailed deer. So that would be my favorite animal to go hunting. I've hunted squirrels, and I've never been bear hunting. Hunted partridge, duck, all of those other good things. But deer was that's what I was born into, and that's what I did the most of, and that's what I like to do the best. And so white-tailed deer, the northern variety. And as far as the rifles are concerned, my first rifle was a 30-30 Winchester, which I dearly loved for a bunch of reasons, because it was a cowboy gun and things like that, which you always saw in the movies. But the gun that I used that for deer hunting for many, many years. And then my dad passed me his deer rifle, which is a Remington 700 30-06. So I don't do a lot of deer hunting right now because I'm in California, but when we do go hunting and when I take the guns out, I like that 30-06. It was my dad's rifle. That's part of why I like it so much. I do have a real long-range rifle. I have a 300 Win Mag that is a sniper rifle that my wife actually bought me for a Christmas present about 3 years ago. That's my ultra long-range rifle that it can reach out a long ways and touch somebody. But it's the Remington 700 30-06 caliber. That's my dad's rifle. That's the one. If I go into the woods deer hunting tomorrow, that's the gun I'd take with me. Dan Tullen, what is your favorite car? Well, that one's easy. It's a 1967 Camaro. And it's funny because my daughter's sitting right here in front of me, and that was her car. She bought the car, my daughter Megan. She bought that car and totally reworked it, put it in water. I'm not talking about, taking it to somebody and saying, do this for me. My daughter literally on a creeper on the ground underneath, installing exhaust systems, headers, reworking the lifters, the whole 9 yards. That was her car. She did that all the way through high school. Paid for it with all her own money. She worked 3 jobs actually at the same time when she was in high school to do that. And it just so happens that 67 Camaro that she loved so dearly was also the same car that I loved dearly, and my wife, because my wife had a 69 Camaro when I married her. So we were Chevy people and loved those cars, loved the muscle cars. And so when Megan got to the point where she was going to have a family and needed some money and things like that, my wife and I just bought the car back from her, and now we own that 67 Camaro. And it's actually, Megan, you guys just had an exhaust leak fixed in it just the other day, right? And so anyway, that's my favorite car. I love the Camaro. It was a beautiful car. You get into details and all that. I like the 67 more than the 68, and certainly more than the 69. They started to do some subtle changes to the car as it evolved. But that 67 Camaro, the original design, is in my mind, the greatest muscle car that was ever built. How did you get into making black powder guns? Well, that seed was planted probably when I was about 8 years old, watching Davy Crockett series on Walt Disney with Fess Parker. And those, it's one of those things that's an American. They were all over the world. Don't get me wrong, but being from America, that was an American pioneer gun, and I just, coonskin cap and the leather fringe jackets. I mean, how many little kids in the United States had those things when they were growing up? It always reminds me of that movie Christmas Story, where the one bully's got the coonskin cap. I wasn't a bully, but I had my coonskin cap. I'll tell you that, and a lot of my friends did too. So, part of that, identifying with that, Davy Crockett, Danny Boone, pioneer thing was, eventually planted that seed about those flintlock rifles and stuff like that. So couldn't do it when I was 8, 10, 12 years old. But fast forward 20 or 30 years, and all of a sudden the movie Last of the Mohicans comes on the scene, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Two things important about that movie. It was a great story. And a great story ends up making a great movie, and they did a good job with it. And Danny, who was the author of Last of the Mohicans? Was that Daniel Defoe? Or?
I don't recall.
Yeah, it was, again, a good story is a good story. And so that's part of the reason I love that movie so much. But the other reason was it was all about those tomahawks and flintlock rifles. So that really put me on I want to make one of those. So I did. It's like custom knife making. Before I made knives, I didn't realize there was a custom knife making world out there. Well, I didn't realize that there was a black powder muzzle loading flintlock rifle cap and ball, custom making gun world out there either. And then I started to look into it and basically fell in love with the fact that, man, I could make something like one of those Davy Crockett guns and stuff. So I started on that. In a little side story, one of my friends that I knew for many, many years, who bought a lot of knives from us and all that, him and his wife are just great people. And one of the magazines that I started getting involved in buying was called Muzzleloader Magazine. And it was one of my favorite magazines because it just got all these great historical stories about colonial America and the pioneers and all that, along with a lot of stuff about muzzleloading rifles. And anyway, I made a couple of the guns, and we took some pictures and put them up on Instagram or something. And I get a call from a guy, and it's my friend. And he says, "Hey, Ernie, I just saw that post about the rifles. I'm glad you're starting to do that. I've been involved in that for quite a while." I go, "Really, man? I mean, really do the knife world?" He goes, "Yeah. And I said, "Well, that's great, man. I love them too." And he goes, "Yeah, I saw your name come through on the subscription list for the magazine." And I go, "What magazine?" He goes, "Muzzleloader." And I go, "Yeah, I just subscribed to it." I said, "Do you work for Muzzleloader?" And he goes, "Well, kinda." And I go, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And he goes, "Well, I own the magazine." And I was like, "You gotta be kidding me." So here's a guy that I knew for many, many years, way more into muzzleloading guns than I ever had assumed. And lo and behold, he owns the magazine that is probably my favorite magazine that I get. Sorry, all you knife guys. I like Blade and all that too, but when I'm sitting around at night, I'm reading Muzzleloader magazine. So, and if you guys are interested in any of that, you don't even have to be into black powder rifles and all that. The histories, the stories, that these guys pull out and run in that magazine. It's an outstanding magazine. It's called Muzzleloader Magazine. T-Rex Apple. Who made the first tactical knife? You or Bob Terzuola? How can they call you the father of the tactical knife if he made the first one? Well, did he make the first one? I don't know. I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't make the first one. Again, that's one of those weird things that people get into. Who did this first or who did it second? Hell, I had an Almar sear knife that was made, 20 years before Bob made a knife or made a tactical knife, and 30, 20 years before I made a tactical knife, and that was a pretty tactical knife. It was the Almar survival escape, resistance, and survival, evasion, resistance, and escape knife. So that's a pretty damn tactical knife, and that was made many, many years ago. What's a tactical knife for that matter? I don't know. So I've never really paid that much attention to who was first or anything. But I will say this, for example, people create these things. They create these controversies. I remember when I was at the Gracie Academy, and there was, the original guys to come to the U.S. was Horion Gracie, and he brought his brothers over, and they started up teaching the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And once it started to catch hold, there were other members of the family, cousins, and other Brazilians that came over. And there was the Machado family, and they were also Jiu-Jitsu people, and they were cousins. And I remember reading in the martial arts magazines and stuff like that, and seeing in these forums about how Higan Machado would kick Rickson Gracie's rear end, and he could beat him with one hand tied behind his back, and then Rickson or Hoyce or Hoyler could beat Jean-Jacques Machado, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm reading all this stuff, and I'm going, man, didn't know these guys hated each other so bad because they're in the other room practicing together. There's Higan with Rickson rolling around on the ground getting ready for the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Championships. And there's Jean-Jacques training with Hoyler and Hoyce and everybody else getting ready for some Pan Am thing. So I was going, man, for hating each other and wanting to kick each other's ass, they get along pretty damn well. And, the point I'm making is that people create controversies and things where they don't exist, and they don't know the backstory, and maybe they just can't because they're not in on it. Bob's a good friend of mine. I never say anything, contrary about him. He did he make the first tactical knife? I don't think so. And again, it goes back to, I will say this. I will say this. Before there was Elvis, there was rock and roll, but Elvis brought it into the living room of everybody in the known world. Before there was the Beatles, there was pop music, but the Beatles brought pop music to the populace. Before there was Muhammad Ali, there was boxing, but Muhammad Ali brought boxing into the living rooms of just about everybody in the United States. I brought tactical knives into the dance, and again, it's just a matter of I happen to be in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, and so I never called myself the father of tactical knives. That's something that was given to me in many places by magazines and articles and people out there. So I'll wear it because I did. I didn't invent it. I didn't, but I'm the tactical knife maker in the world. There's no question about that. I'm responsible for probably more tactical knife designs than any knife maker in history. Not just in numbers, but also numbers of designs. My knives are made by, and have been made by many different companies in the numbers of tens and tens of thousands. We as a knife company made tens and tens of thousands of knives, hundreds of thousands of knives over the years. So, when it comes to tactical knives, I guess I am the father of tactical knives because we owned the category and basically created it. And again, people don't know the backstories on a lot of that stuff, and they see what people will say on the internet and all that. But for me, some of the greatest compliments were from the owners of companies like Gerber, Buck, Spyderco, Benchmade, who all have come to me and from time to time and said, Ernest, thank God you came along because you revived the knife industry. You put a flame back under knives when we were just in the doldrums and everybody was making hunting knives and trying to compete, head to head in all this. And you created a genre, and which, before Emerson Knives was, and again, we started this company as a tactical knife company. That's what it was. No one had a tactical knife company. It did not exist. And if you look back in time, all the companies, Gerber, Bucks, Spyderco, everybody, they all had knives, but they didn't have tactical knives. And within a couple of years of Emerson Knives coming on the scene, every single one of those companies had page after page in their catalogs that were dedicated to the new genre, tactical knives. Well, we created that. So yeah, I'll wear that now all day long. But who was first? I don't really give a damn. Doesn't matter to me. There was jiu-jitsu long before there was Hoist Gracie, and the Gracies brought that into the living room. Same thing with Kung Fu. There was Kung Fu before there was Bruce Lee, but when you say Kung Fu, there's only one name that pops in your head, and that's Bruce Lee. Jonas 12, how come you're not in the Cutlery Hall of Fame? Shouldn't you be? I see people in the Blade Cutlery Hall of Fame I've never even heard of. You know what? I'm not going to go there. That's not my decision. I don't know why I'm not in the Hall of Fame. It doesn't really matter to me at this point. I know who I am. The people that I am the most proud of know who I am. The people that I'm the most proud of use my knives, and they use them to save lives, and they occasionally have used them to take lives. But I don't need to be in the Hall of Fame in the knife world, because I'm in the real Hall of Fame, which is in the hands of the users. And that's where that is. And quite frankly, I'm a Black Belt Hall of Fame member, and I'm a United States Martial Arts Hall of Fame member. Those things are actually more near and dear to my heart than the Cutlery Hall of Fame. Let's just say that. So. SX11. Do you ever make custom versions of your knives, or fancied up versions? How do I get one of those? Well, the answer to that is yeah. I am a custom knife maker. I was a custom knife maker way before I owned a production knife company. And so, again, I started making knives in my garage with those things that I talked about earlier, the hacksaw and the file and a homemade grinder. So I learned how to make knives and design knives as a custom maker, and became, I guess, pretty well known in the custom world. At one time I had over a 10, 12-year wait for my custom knives. An Emerson custom knife I would sell for $300 to $400, $500, and the minute that it would leave my hands and go into the hands of the customer, the knife would triple in price. It would go to $1,500 to $2,000. So, yeah, I do make fancied up versions, but my knives were always made to be. I mean, I made fancy ones in the very beginning, yeah, and fell back into the hard use category. They were still handmade custom knives, and but they weren't fancy. But since this question came up, I'm going to show you something right now. What are a fancied up Emerson knife? So we're going to take a look at a couple now. You guys will have to kind of take a look at this. This, again, what's fancy about it? Well, it's checkered. It's a painted black. This is the CQC6 model that we were talking about earlier. This is my iconic Emerson design. But this knife, in its black version, just like it is right here, will go for and sell for sometimes $7,000, $8,000, $10,000. Now, that's not me putting that price on it. That's the customers putting the price on it, because they trade, and each time they get traded, they trade up, and they become more and more valuable. So here's another one that's a fancied up version of that same CQC6. And this is an all titanium version called the Ultimate 6, anodized. checkered. Again, I don't know what this knife would sell for. It could sell for $5, $6, $7, $8, $10,000. It's not for sale. That's one that's going to be passed along to the kids. And so I do make some fancy dressed up ones. For example, here's a knife that we have done. We're working to do some fancy knives. This knife is called the Sapphire 6. Again, that iconic CQC6 knife. Now, this knife has over 2 ounces, almost 3 ounces of solid gold on it. And as you can see, these are sapphires. This is a solid gold thumb opener along with sapphires set in that. The back spacer back here is solid gold with pave sapphires set in that. And if we turn it around and look at the back side here, the clip has a solid gold Emerson skull. And the jewelry part of that was provided by my good friends over at Steel Flame. And Derek Obataki and Leonard helped me with this. And, it's a fully dressed up mokutai bolster. It's an absolutely stunning knife. It's heavy because of all that gold. But it's it's going to be a great collector piece that we're going to have available at our upcoming Christmas virtual knife show and auction. So, yeah, do I make fancy knives? I guess you could call that fancy. It is fancy. It's one of those knives where I was like, damn, do I want to even sell this? Because this could be an heirloom piece. But we've got about several $1,000s in gold alone, about $4,000 or $5,000 just in the gold and the sapphires and invested in it. And so I got to sell it.
I have a couple of live questions if you wanted to take a...
Yeah, let's take a live question.
Sure. Steve G30 Knife Pimper from Instagram asks, do you plan on any more supermodels like the Super Commander, Super 7?
Yeah, we always plan on that. It's just a matter of the super knives. You gotta have the big pocket to put that knife in. Sometimes the medium-sized knives are always our best-selling knives, along with the minis actually sell like crazy also, because a lot of guys can put those in their pockets when they're not dressed in blue jeans, but are dressed in slacks where they're going out. But as far as the supers, yeah, we always when I design a knife, let's say I make a model XYZ, I'll always do the standard size, a mini size, and a super size, because that way we've got that family, and if you look at almost all of our knives, we have that combination in play on almost all of them. Super Roadhouse, Mini Roadhouse, Super Commander, Mini Commander, Super A100, Mini A100, Super 7, regular 7, Mini 7. So yeah, we always do that, and you guys determine what I do a lot of times in that, I always told people, look, for a knife maker or somebody who's starting up a company, you don't want to make a size, we're going to specialize in size 27 shoes, because there aren't many people who can wear a size 27 shoes. So I got to make the shoes that are the sizes that most people are going to wear in order to sell my product. So again, if there's a demand for super models for a particular knife that justifies us putting that into production or even doing a sprint run, we'll do it.
Cool. And I have one. I have about a minute remaining, it looks like, on this Instagram Live. Casey Vermillion on Instagram, good customer. He asks, what model do you tend to carry the most?
Oh, good, because that's a question that's also in here. I carry the Tiger, and I just like the knife. I should have cleaned it up before I brought it out to show you guys. But that's my knife. That's my carry knife. And like I said, I should have cleaned it up maybe to show it off, but I'm a user, and being pretty and fancy is not in my wheelhouse for my tools. So, but that's my knife right there. Are you going to be able to continue on with more Instagram?
Yeah, once this ends right now in about 10 seconds, I'm going to see if I can start up another one.
Anyway, thanks, Casey, for being a great customer of ours. Appreciate it.